everyone. Down there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Because it's the sort of room that would absorb a bit of sound. My name's Lorraine Morgan, and I'm here to welcome you to this quite unusual seminar, which I hope you will enjoy and I hope will lead to all sorts of interesting things in where you work and who you work with. Just a few items of housekeeping. We're in an extra care facility owned by Mellon Homes, which is fairly new. So at the moment there's no fire drill planned, the usual things, isn't it? But if we do need to evacuate, the fire doors are right there, right where Tanya is and Claire. And I think there's some at the back of the room as well, so it's easy to get out onto the patio area out there. Toilets are right out this door and to the right, and there's 3 on this floor. Yes, there's one by the lift.
Almost one opposite, and if you just go right through the doors and an immediate left.
Okay. Okay, so I can take that sticky off now. That's done. Right, done the toilets, done the fire. Phones. Could you check your phones? By all means, leave them on if you want to take some pictures. But switch them on silent, please. I know I always forget mine, so I'll check mine when I sit down. My role today is to chair the seminar and provide you with just a little brief summary at the end. I'm absolutely delighted that we've got a real mix of care sectors here, from health, social care commissioners, inspection and regulation, I hope as well. What this offers you is an exciting solution, I think, or something for you to think about, how we celebrate good care and how we improve it. And for all of you who know me, and I think some of you probably do, this has been my mission for the last 25 years. And when you hear from my colleagues, you'll find that it's their passion and their mission too. A little bit of background to this seminar, I think, is quite important, because it's the result of several strong supporters and the values that underpin good care. One, it's around coming in.
You're lost in the
Coming in, find a seat. One is around the joint concern for how we monitor care, in terms of the person receiving that care and the relationship perspective. We want something that identifies good care and supports staff who are trying their hardest, and we want something that identifies kindness and compassion, which are the real elements of care and relationships. The second thing that underpins the reason for this seminar is that I have a role. A couple of years ago I set up a special interest group on ageing and nursing practice and the older person. I'd done it much earlier than that in Wales, but it's very difficult to network and move things along when everybody is so busy. So what we did is we tried to set it up within the Welsh Nursing Academy, and for those of you who know, the Welsh Nursing Academy no longer exists, and has moved into an international nursing organisation called STTI, which is the logo you see there on the programme. STTI is based in America, but has branches all over the world and is the second largest nursing organisation in the world. And I thought it would be very appropriate that this special interest group supported having a seminar like this. So that's another reason. We wrote a position statement on nursing practice, and we'll be sending that out to you after the seminar. The third thing is that I'm a board member of Mellon Homes, so it made sense. In Wales, housing, health and social care is working much more closely together. It made sense that if we were going to have a seminar, that we had a seminar involving everyone that's linked into care. And Mellon is at the forefront, some of you will know, around In One Place, which is a large sort of project locally looking at housing, health and social care working together very closely around continuing healthcare. And finally, I'm absolutely delighted that to be involved in an NHS Wales award-winning venture called Chat, which you may hear about a little bit later, which has been developed by two senior nurses in an Iron Bevan Health Board, and is working in care homes, and also with volunteers from the NHS Retirement Fellowship, of which the chair is here today. So those are 4 aspects of why we needed this seminar and how we could support people to take things forward. But why this seminar? Why now? Well, we all know that the care experience is strongly in the public eye, and care practitioners from all sectors must be seen to be monitoring their service and ensuring that the public have a good experience, as I said before, of care and kindness. I've known Lynn, who's going to talk about Sit and See, for a long time. We were both involved in the Royal College of Nursing UK Nursing Older People Professional Forum, as well as Jane, who will be talking to you later as well. A lot of work in the 90s and early 2000s came out of the work of that forum, but sadly that work has ceased and it was not really taken forward anymore. However, the work brought us all together and we all kept in touch, and I've always watched closely where Lynn worked and what she was doing. At one point we were both working in care homes, different parts. Welcome, that's right. Plenty of seats there for you. So I was very excited when I found out about her work on developing this care observational tool. Monitoring care practice was an aspect of my research quite a long time ago, but it's what's kept me going, I think. And I was determined to bring her to Wales and possibly try out this tool in several different environments. Hence we have housing, health and social care here represented today. Lynn's got considerable expertise and has achieved a great deal in her working life. However, there is one thing that stands out for me as I've watched her move between her roles. Her strong internal values of integrity and justice, and providing and promoting nursing that shows loving kindness to shine through all her achievements. In all that she does, she promotes an understanding of the whole person and relationship-centred care, something we should all be doing if we do provide care or we manage it. So I'm very proud to know her, and I'm very proud to, excited that Jane has come with her, because Jane and I have not worked so closely together, have we? Because you've been doing different things elsewhere. But when I met them in November and went to their conference on this, it was great to see them so enthused and energised by this. So I think probably that comes to the end of just explaining to you some of the reasons why we want to do this, and a little bit about Jane and Lynn. Copies of the presentation will be sent to you after the seminar. We'll also send you the Wales position statement on nursing practice and the older person, so you've got an electronic copy. But the other thing, and I probably need to ask your permission, but I hope nobody says no, is that we're going to record this and it will go on YouTube, so that for those who are on the waiting list who couldn't come, they will be able to see this too. So we don't want anybody to miss out on all this exciting stuff, really, do we? So I hope that's okay with everyone, and we'll send you the link to that as well. So without further ado, thank you very much. And I think we've got Lynn now.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, I knew I was going to be on YouTube. I'd have bought a new frock. It's an old frock, well, you know, relatively speaking. Well, thanks very much, Lorraine, and certainly for those very kind words. So I'm Lynn Fair, as it says there, and I now work as an independent consultant nurse. I was in the NHS for donkey's years, and I've also worked in care homes, always worked on the health and social care interface, always worked with older people. And the bulk of my work for the last 10 years has actually been around safeguarding adults, and for my sins I specialise as a consultant nurse investigating allegations of neglect, particularly institutional neglect. So the bulk of my clinical practice, the bulk of my work has been for the last 10 years or so looking at the darker side of the caring world. That can, I think, if one's not very careful, give you a very slant and tainted view about the caring world. But I know that the caring world is not about the stuff you see on Panorama and the investigations that I end up doing, or the reports that I do for the police for staff to be prosecuted for willful neglect. I know that is a tiny, tiny part of what is a huge caring world that is very caring and compassionate. But the problem that we have is that most people out there actually think that the world I know is the big world of care, and it's not. And the technology is not working. Pointing at the wrong thing. I don't do technology. Oh, look, jumped too far. I pressed it too.
You're on YouTube.
Oh, sorry, YouTube. Just when an agent's watching to see whether I need to go to Hollywood or not. And it's very, very important to me as well in terms of practice development, in terms of how we support staff. Work I used to do, work I did when I was in the care homes, was to look at how we develop everybody who cares and supports for somebody, an older person particularly. That we think about nurses, we think about care assistants, but actually everybody who comes into touch with that older person is caring for them, whether directly or indirectly. And I've been a long believer and developed training programs that was validated for housekeepers, for chefs, for administrators, about how they can work and offer indirect care and offer person-centred care. How can a cleaner clean someone's room in a person-centred way? How can a chef actually really get to know the residents that they're catering for so that they can cater in a person-centred way? That's always been central to my belief system. So the Sit and See tool is about how we capture that. The fundamental part of safeguarding, the fundamental part of adult protection, protecting vulnerable adults, is prevention. And if we can identify the really good things that are going on all the time, day in, day out, in microscopic detail, in little tiny droplets of care that are going on completely unnoticed, if we can capture those and share those and celebrate those, we can reinforce the good that is going on now, and that can help to eliminate the poor and the negative. Because if we can build up people's pride in the place where they work, to say, I'm actually proud to be a care assistant that works at the Meadows care home, rather than just someone who says, well, yeah, I'm just a care assistant, or I'm just a nurse, I just work with the elderly because I've retired, so I'll just do the elderly now. If we can help people to take pride in what they do by reinforcing to them that actually to work with people who are very frail, very old and very vulnerable is a highly skilled activity, by demonstrating to them how they do that, not just in terms of whether they can administer medicines or whether they can do a leg ulcer dressing or whether they know the signs and symptoms of dementia, we can reinforce the professionalism of everybody that works with them. And what we can also do is work on the road of prevention, so that care, the culture of care, whether it's a hospital ward, a GP practice, outpatients departments, community care settings, or a care home, they are all the same. Culture of care is made up not just by the leaders, but by the people that work in there. And it's the culture of care that goes wrong that makes a place end up being an institutionally abusive situation. So the sit and see tool is about spotting those tiny, tiny things that actually make the biggest difference. So if you think about it, if you think about yourselves, if you think about a family member who has been into hospital, you know, your Auntie Maud who's gone in to have her bunions done, and you go along to see her and you take along your bunch of grapes and your box of Quality Street to go and see Auntie Maud because it's your turn to do it. And you go along and you sit next to her and she's in bed there and she's had the operation and you're sitting there and you're slowly munching your way through the Quality Streets because it pulls her teeth out and she's diabetic and you forgot that. And you eat the grapes while she's busy telling you the gory details of the operation. And then the conversation after about 10 minutes dries up and you're sitting there thinking, oh, what do I tell her about? What do we talk about now? Because it's another 50 minutes to the end of visiting time. And then she says, see that woman over there? 15 minutes she waited yesterday for her bell to be answered. Disgusting. 15 minutes. And you see that blood stain on the floor under that bed? That's been there a week. I think, well, it can't have been actually Auntie Maud because you've only been here 3 days, but it's been there a week. And she sits and she observes, and then she starts to tell you about the blood stain, about the fact the housekeeper's going to come round. Before you know where you are, she's telling you, this place is filthy. Is it any wonder everyone dies in here of MRSA and that C difficulty? They all die of it, you know. This hospital is disgusting. I've seen it in the papers, I know, I can see it. This NHS, gone to rack and ruin. Before you know where you are, Auntie Maud is agreeing with everything that's in the Mail on Sunday and the Daily Mail, and that the whole system is awful and everybody doesn't care and the place is filthy because everyone's dying of all these diseases. That's what happens. When you think about a family member or yourself that's been into hospital. I was on the train going up to Liverpool last year to do some work, and this lady, you know, so we were talking with this lady, and she was a film producer, which I thought sounded very exciting, but she didn't want to tell me about that. But because I said I was a nurse, oh well, that's even more exciting, because then you start, you know, she thinks I'm a nurse on everything, and she starts sort of talking to me about nursing matters, and I'm thinking, oh, don't go and talk about anything embarrassing, because I don't do embarrassing bits of the body, don't do blood and tubes. But she started to tell me about how she'd had an operation on her arm because she'd had a serious accident and her arm was seriously damaged. Now it was January, it was this time last year, and her hands were poking out the bottom of her coat and her hands looked like they were wiggling normal, and being a very technical mental health nurse, I thought, well, they're wiggling all right, so they must be okay. So, but anyway, and she was busy starting to tell, she said, oh, I had to have this major surgery on my arm to have it reconstructed. And I said, oh, right, okay. Thinking, don't tell me about the gory details because I faint. And then she just said, well, she said, it was almost 3 days before I had anything to eat. And when I came round from the anaesthetic, I was so hungry, I asked for something to eat. And, you know, all they gave me was a stale tuna sandwich. That was all she told me. Now, clearly, she must have had some pretty amazing surgery because she was able to completely use both hands and arms normally. But she didn't tell this complete stranger about that. All she told this complete stranger was that she'd had a stale tuna sandwich. And that was her immediate memory of that care intervention. And when we think about it, I would suggest to you that that is what the human nature of describing care is about. We get on to eventually talking about, oh yeah, and then I had this drug and then they did this amazing test and etc, etc. But the way we describe care is about how that humanity, that little tiny thing that little humanity that makes the tiny difference, that makes us feel valued. When you go to the supermarket, how many of you have decided, I'm not going to that supermarket again, because whenever you go in there, none of the staff look at you. I asked them where the eggs are and they couldn't bother to tell me. Then you get to the checkout and they don't even bother to look up when they put the money back in your hand. That's because how you were being treated as a fellow human being. Whether they've got the best prices or not is the secondary factor. How many of you decide not to go back to a restaurant? Not necessarily because of the quality of the food or the cost of the meal, but because of how the waitresses were, because of how they made you feel that you were welcome, because of how efficient they were. It's those things that make the difference. So what happened with the sit and see tool is that I was very conscious that these are the sorts of things that we need to think about. It keeps jumping, I'm not very good at this technology. Go back, go back. So, the tool, I developed a tool in conjunction with Brighton University Hospital Trust when I was still working in the NHS, because the chief nurse said to me one day, how do I know if my 6,000 nurses are being care and compassionate? What is care and compassion? How can I bottle it? How do I know that every day, day in, day out, people are being caring and compassionate? Yes, we know about the lovely awards that people might win about a big project, or that an individual might win for being an outstandingly caring individual. But how do I know everybody is? So I started thinking about it, and I thought about, and I walked around the wards with her, and I saw this tissue viability nurse, and he pulled back the curtains, because I was thinking, what is it? What is this care and compassion? What are we really talking about? And I watched this tissue viability nurse, and he pulled back the curtain, and he moved his trolley out the way, and he'd obviously done some sort of leggy type treatment, because she's got a nice new bandage on, so I thought, leg, tissue viability nurse, I've made the connections. And he asked the question that we've been told by the Department of Health in England that we have to ask is, and how else can I help you? Is there anything else I can do for you? Which is one of the questions they're obliged now to ask. But of course it's not been dictated in what manner you ask it, so you can ask it in 150 different ways. But fortunately this TVN did say to this very old lady, very frail lady, is there anything else I can do? And very tentatively she said to him, well, I can't work out how to find Radio 4 on the radio. So he just sort of said, oh right, okay, so he pulls down the television radio thingy, and he twiddles a few knobs, and in 25-30 seconds he'd found Radio 4, he'd listened on the headphones that she could hear it, given her the headphones, checked that she was okay, said, oh, is it nearly time for Woman's Hour? Had a little bit of a chat, 15-second chat about what was going to be on the radio. See you later, he says, and off he goes. And I thought, that is care and compassion. That is showing you care. Now, we can all be sitting there, I'm sure some of you are sitting there and saying, yeah, but that's what we should be doing anyway. Yes, it is. But let's get real here. We have a problem. We have a problem in the caring world that people don't see that we're caring. So perhaps we do have to go right back to basics and say, what is it that makes me feel cared for? What is it that makes our patients feel cared for? And if we can capture that, if we can learn to see it, then we can learn to celebrate it. And if we learn to celebrate it, we can learn to be proud of it. And if we can learn to be proud of it, we can learn to tell other people, this is what we do here. This is how we show we care. You go to some hospitals, I go up and down the country a lot, go to some hospitals and you walk up and down the corridors and everyone is very busy and very efficient. You go to other hospitals and everyone is still just as busy, just as efficient, but they smile and they say good morning as you're walking up and down the corridor. And what a difference that makes to how I feel as a complete stranger. In some places I'm standing, scratching my head, looking at the balls to see where I've got to go. And I'm ignored as these very efficient people. Porters, doctors, nurses are very efficiently walking up and down the corridors past me. Go to other hospitals, I'll be standing scratching my head, and those very efficient nurses, doctors and porters will be walking by and one of them will say, are you lost? Can I help you? Where is it you're looking for? How long did that take out of their day? 30 seconds? Made me feel an awful lot better, made me feel much more cared for. It's those tiny, tiny things that make the biggest difference. And that's what the tool captures. I was also very conscious of the fact that we actually haven't got hours and hours and hours to spend doing yet another audit or yet another observation tool. There are some excellent audits, excellent observation tools out there, but we need to be realistic. How much time do we actually have? There's no point in developing yet another training system or yet another audit tool that takes 3 or 4 or 5 days to learn to use because we haven't got the time. And actually, why make something seem even more scientific and complicated than it actually is? Because what we're talking about isn't scientific and complicated. It's about humanity. It's about how, in this culture, in this country, do we value someone else as a fellow human being. You don't need a degree to know that. You just need to know it, because when you experience it, you know it, you felt it. So we needed something that was quick, we needed something that was simple, we needed something that people didn't need to learn what it means, they just need to learn how to do it. Because you all already know what it feels like to feel cared for. We also needed something that anybody could use. We need a tool that anyone can use, whether you are a medical person, whether you are a social care person, whether you are an inspector, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a patient, whether you're a family member. It doesn't matter who you are, anybody should be able to do an observation and record whether from where I'm sitting I would have been happy being spoken to that way. So those were the key things that I was trying to achieve, and I looked at all sorts of different systems that were already around, and I also looked at perhaps we'll forget the PowerPoint.
Let Lorraine do it.
Let Lorraine do it, and I'll just go, I'll go next.
Right, which do I press?
That's a good assistant, isn't it? So what I did was I then worked with the University of Brighton to develop the Sit and See tool. And what we do is we've now got 5 versions of the tool. It started off with 1. So there are now 5 versions of the tool. There's the version for General Hospital, version for Community Services, Care Home version, Mental Health Services version, and we've got a High Secure Services version, which was developed specifically for NHS England, who quality assure Ashworth, Broadmoor and Rampton high secure hospitals. And I think if they can ensure that the most highly vulnerable, exceptional needs of patients that there are who need to be in that high secure service receive care and compassionate care. If they can do it there, which they do, because I went for the day and I was so impressed with the quality of care and compassion that goes on in Ashworth Hospital. It was humbling to see with such a highly sensitive group of patients. If they can do it there, we should be able to do it anywhere. We've also used it in outpatients departments, because what a difference it can make to somebody when they're sitting in an outpatients department, perhaps with a worrying possible diagnosis. What a difference it can make as to how they're greeted. It's not what is said when they're greeted, but it's how it's said when they're greeted. When we used the tool, it was in an outpatients, an eye clinic, and it was in a tertiary hospital, so these people had clearly gone to this hospital because they got something rather unusual with their eyes. They got something that couldn't be managed in the local facilities. And we were sitting in the waiting room, just watching the world go by, because that's all you're doing. But you're watching the world go by, but thinking about what it is you're seeing. And we saw classic examples of how people are called into the clinic. And the first example, I will use Lorraine as my guinea pig. She didn't know I was going to do this. You don't need to get up, Lorraine. Just, I'll use your name. And so the nurse comes out, and we do have very efficient nurses. She comes out and she says, Lorraine Morgan. And she sort of looks around above the heads of people, because we don't want to make eye contact, because that can get in the way, because someone might want to talk to you and you're too busy to talk to you. So I'm not going to look at you, so I don't have to make eye contact with you, and that helps me remain efficient. So she looks around for a while, Lorraine Morgan! No, Lorraine Morgan, and she goes. So we saw that happen. We also saw the nurse comes out, and she does, Lorraine Morgan, Lorraine Morgan. Oh, Lorraine Morgan, I would like to come this way, please. Very efficient nurse goes off to the clinic door, waiting for Mrs. Morgan to catch up with me. There she is, with her Zimmer, out the chair, with her arthritis, trying to walk as quickly as she possibly could, because that poor nurse, they're very busy, these nurses. NHS is very pushed, isn't it? Got enough staff. I'm lucky to have this appointment. So poor Mrs. Morgan is walking as fast as she possibly can with her Zimmer, while Mrs. Efficient Nurse Fair is standing over here with her papers at the door, waiting to get on with the work. And then we saw the third type of nurse. And she would come out, and she says, Lorraine Morgan. Lorraine Morgan. Oh, Mrs. Morgan. Hello, my name's Lynn. would you like to come with me? We're going to go through to the clinic. And she walks with Mrs. Morgan at Mrs. Morgan's pace. And while she was walking, she had a little chat with her, found out where she'd come from that day, told her what was going to be happening, advised her that when they got to the clinic door, the light was going to be off and it was going to be dark, and that was because they were going to be putting drops in her eyes and it was something to do with the test they were going to do. Now, we could say, yeah, but you know, that's all very well, but we haven't all got time to do that. Mrs. Efficient Nurse Fair, number 2, she couldn't do the drops any quicker because Mrs. Morgan couldn't walk any faster. What difference did it make to the productivity of that outpatients clinic? The 3 different ways that those patients were called. It made no difference whatsoever. It didn't make the clinic run any quicker, didn't get them through more patients any quicker, but it made a huge difference to how those 3 patients felt. Because the last lady, you could see she was being reassured, so there was positive person-centred care, there was positive communication, there was a bit of health education going on, there was a bit of relationship formation going on, just in that 30 seconds. So the sit and see tool, next please assistant, the sit and see tool is not about what you do, but it's about how you do it. It's the cliche of the song. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. It's a cliche, we all know it, but it's true. So it records the small things that make a very big difference to a person's hospital, care home, community stay. It's what families remember the most. It's what people remember the most. They don't remember the amazing technical intervention. They might do eventually, but they remember is the small things that made them feel valued, that made them feel like a fellow human being. All of us in the caring world, whether our role is to clean a hospital or a care home, to wash the pots and pans in the kitchen, or to undertake brain surgery, all of us need to use 3 things. We need to use our heads, our hearts and our hands. We use our heads to know the theory of whatever it is we're doing, even if it's the simple thing of knowing which buttons to press on a dishwasher. We need to know the theory of what we're doing. Our hands, we need to be able to have the practical skill to do whatever it is our role is. And the heart is that we need to actually, A, want to be doing it ourselves, but B, we want to show we care to the person we're doing it for. And what I believe is that when it goes wrong, when we become technically and perhaps intellectually very advanced, but we lose sight of the heart, is when we start getting these big problems. Next please, thank you. So, anyone can be an observer. I've been through this. It only takes a few hours to do the training. Again, I wanted it to be as quick as possible, so it's 2.5 hours training, because you don't need to learn what care and compassion is, because you know it, because you are a human being too. And you just need to learn how to use the tool. When you're doing an observation, it's a minimum of 15 minutes and a maximum of 50. You can do it lots of different times. You can do it different times of the day. You can do it frequently. You can do it infrequently. You are capturing what's going on at that time. But what you're doing is your staff as an observer, people that learn to be observers, is that you're seeing things from the patient's point of view. You're sitting there and you're thinking, how would I feel if I was spoken to that way? How would I feel? How do I think my mum would feel, who's got advanced dementia? How do I think my mum might feel if she was spoken to that way? It's not to do with technical things. It's not to do with whether the injection was done right, or whether this was done right, or the medicines were given right, or whether even it was the right medicine. That's for another audit. That's for another person to worry about. This is just literally, how did I feel? Did they make me feel cared for? And it builds pride for staff because it celebrates what they do. How often is it, for those of you that are in roles of supervisors or managers, when you end up talking to staff when things go wrong? Or you know the staff, if you run a big organisation or you're involved in a big care team, that you know the staff that have caused you more problems more quickly than you know the staff that actually just get on and do their work. Because naturally for us, it's what happens. We get caught up in dealing with the problems. We get caught up in investigating the things that go wrong. And so those people that are carrying on doing a good job, just carry on doing it. No one notices them, unless they're an amazing high flyer and they invent something amazing or they do something amazing. But we have this middle group of people that are the foundations and the fundamental group of staff that keep everything going, that don't never get noticed. They're grey, they're invisible. And yet each one of those, every day that they're working, will do things that make a big difference to your patients or residents without anyone noticing. Things that we've observed on observations is we've observed a maintenance man in a care home who walked through and he stopped for a moment and had a little bit of a banter with a resident about the football match, the local football team that was playing on the telly the night before. And they had a little bit of a banter about the score and about the league tables of their... And then he went off and carried on doing his work. In the A&E department, it was noticed the porter who took a lady off to x-ray and came back, and when he came back, he said he parked her, as you do, park her in the waiting room, and he says, "Is that okay?" She says, "I'm ever so cold." And he says, "I'll see what I can do." And he dashed off and probably found the last blanket in the hospital, knowing what things are like at the moment. Found a blanket, tucked her in. He says, "Is that okay?" "Lovely." Off he goes. No one noticed because it was a busy department. The housekeeper, we observed, who was giving out the teas, and he got to a lady and he said, "Do you want a cup of tea or coffee off the trolley?" And she said, "Well, I've got some fruit teas." And she's all dripped up and can't move. "Got some fruit teas in the bottom there." And he said, "Well, do you want me to get one out for you?" And then got out one of her fruit teas. Then when he gets to the lady next door, she says to him, "Could you do me a favour?" "Oh, I don't know about what's that then," he said. So she said, "Could you give this banana to Doris over there because she's got no fruit?" So he said, "Well, I don't know about that, there might be a charge." Lovely little bit. He didn't say, "Well, I don't know about that. I'm not qualified to hand out bananas." He just said, "Well, I don't know about that. Might be a charge, I might take a little bit of overtime." Tiny little bit of banter. Just a tiny little bit of normal, everyday, caring conversation. Handed the banana over. They had a little bit of a banter, the three of them, while he was pouring the tea, so it didn't take him any longer. And he went off out, carried on his work. And these two ladies had a little bit of a chuckle about how handsome he was, because he was about 22 and had tight trousers on. But okay, that's what happens. But lovely, lovely, lovely stuff that goes by completely unnoticed. And we've got to celebrate those things. We've got to capture those things. And we've got to help people know that those are the things that make the biggest difference. Please, assistant. I've said it's about, I think I've said all the things about on that one, so we can skip. I'm not very good at sticking to the script, I'm sorry. So it is about changing hearts and minds. That staff who work in care settings, sometimes we justify dispassionate care. Sometimes we justify. The NHS, particularly in England, is very good at it. The Royal College of Nursing, I think when we see things on the press, when things have gone wrong, we frequently hear the call, "Well, it's because we didn't have enough staff, because we have management cutbacks, because of, there's the waiting times, government targets or whatever." All of those things may well be reasons why something's gone wrong, but it doesn't make it okay. And when I see these reports and when I see these people on television saying these things, I think, but it doesn't make it okay. Don't justify the fact that that lady didn't get spoken to for 6 hours and didn't get a drink. by blaming someone else. Don't justify it. That mitigates it. That means that what the sanctions, so that you don't actually sack the nurse, you look at the fact that the reason the nurse couldn't give the drink for 6 hours was because she was on her own and she had 20 patients and there weren't enough staff or whatever it happened to be. But it doesn't justify it. And I really, really think we do have to start not mixing up justification of something with the mitigating circumstances about why something went wrong. And we must start accepting responsibility as a profession, as a total caring profession. And when we have yet another panorama programme on the telly about care homes, that we don't have the organisations that represent care homes saying, yes, but it's not fair on all the hundreds of care homes that are really good. No, it's not fair on all the hundreds of care homes that are really good. But it was also not fair on those patients and those residents who were living in those abusive situations. So by the care organisations just saying, well, it's not fair on everyone else who's doing a really good job, that doesn't actually, in the public's view, help them to believe that the care industry accepts that there are things wrong in some places. What I would like them to be saying is, yes, in those care homes, in those organisations, things were very wrong. And we that represent good care homes or good hospitals or good community services, we will not tolerate that to be a representation of our profession, not in my name. That's the way to help the communities out there, the people out there, to know that we are not tolerating it, we are not condoning it by simply saying, oh well, the government don't pay us enough money to look after them. Oh, that's okay then, is it? No, it's not. So the staff help, that the tool helps us to really think about these things because it's totally focused on the patient. So the sit and see tool is like finding your way in the dark. All you learn to see is what is already there. It's all you learn. It's like when your lights go out and there's a power cut, and after 2 or 3 minutes you can see nothing, but after 2 or 3 minutes your eyes start to see what was there. And that's what the sit and see tool does. At the beginning, when you sit and start looking, you see nothing. But then as you clear your mind and think, I'm just here to see what's going on, you start to see everything, as the patients and their families do. Okay, next one, please. So what it looks like is a very simple tool. It's basically 3 bits of paper. And if we could just go on to the next one, because I'm just conscious of a bit short of time. What I've done is I've drawn up a document which has got three groups of types of care, and you grade them: positive, passive or poor. And you basically get one sheet of paper that you record on, and you've got another sheet of paper that reminds you about what the different categories are. So for example, you've got a category of I've just opened the book so that I don't sort of just say it off the top of my head, but I can actually give you a proper example. If you just bear with me a second. Just trying to find one that would be quite easy to explain. Supporting anxiety or distress is one of the categories. So basically you're sitting watching the world go by, and you've got a few patients in a 6-bedded bay, or you've got residents in a lounge. Things are going on, and your eye gets drawn to something that's going on over here. And something that's going on over there is that you've got a lady with dementia who is crying and is saying she wants to go home, or calling out for her mum, or is looking very distressed. Now there might be other things going on in another part of the lounge, but like when you're sitting anywhere, like when you're sitting at the railway station waiting for your train, your eye gets drawn to something that's going on, and that's all you do. Oh, what's going on over there then? Because that's what you do if you were sitting there. If I was sitting there with my mum, I'd be watching what was going on. So that's all I'm doing. I'm watching what's going on. So I'm watching over there and seeing, and I see Claire as the care assistant, and she goes up to this lady, see, oh, Claire's gone, the care assistant's gone over there, is she? So I go over there, I'm sort of thinking, oh, what's she doing? And she could do a number of things, of course, in terms of this lady who's become very distressed. But what what's been developed is that positive care and compassion to this lady who's being very distressed is where the staff member demonstrates care and compassion through the use of appropriate physical contact. So this doesn't necessarily mean all lovey-dovey. It might be appropriate. It might be just the gentle touch of a hand, a therapeutic pause. Now you can tell by the energy, because you go into your friend's house and they're just at a blazing row and there's a pause, but you can tell that it's a bit of a blazing row pause because the atmosphere, you can cut it with a knife. So we all know this intuitively. We know when a pause feels supportive and when a pause feels someone's just about to kill the other person. We know it. It might be a gentle touch. It might be eye contact. Showing sensitivity and assisting the residents to be in control of their actions and lives and offer support to enhance feelings of safety. It might be asking or chatting about things important to the resident, offering reassurance or empathy, genuinely using all of their senses. It could be any one of those things or something similar. That's how we show, that's good care and compassion. It might be passive, it might be a bit businesslike. It might be that, Claire is fed up with this woman because she keeps asking about her mother, but she's got to do the right job because she's done her training and she knows that she's got to do the right thing, so I have to show I care. And that's what business-like is about. That's what passive is about, where people do the right actions but there is just something that's missing. When people smile at you, you've been places where they shake your hand and they smile, but they don't smile with their eyes. They're going through the motions, but that energy that's portrayed across to you tells you, well, they don't really care, they've just been told they have to smile because it's in their customer care training. Passive is momentary demonstration of care and compassion by a fleeting touch, there. So I've done the action. Didn't mean anything. Short statements to demonstrate, to support, but no emotional meaning. Or it could be poor. Claire might actually not be a particularly caring care assistant. Sorry, Claire. And she might actually be completely fed up with this lady who keeps asking for a mother. So she doesn't demonstrate any care and compassion or awareness of the distress. She just ignores her, walks past her, just says, I'll be back in a minute, or something similar. She doesn't touch her, doesn't support her, doesn't make eye contact, and ignores the resident. We've all seen all of those three things. But the one that you remember probably most is the last one. Because the first one is one we take for granted. So all you're doing in a sit and see observation is observing that sort of thing. You might be observing it when someone's being given a drink. You might be observing it when they're being given their medicines. But it's not what they're doing, it's how they're doing it. Giving medicines. I was in a mental health trust this week, teaching sit and see, and we had a 20-minute forensic discussion about the fact that they had a lady who was so agitated that if they made eye contact with her when they gave her a drink, she would become very aggressive. So they had to give her a drink without making eye contact. And they were saying to me, so that means you're saying we don't care. And I said, no, actually, that's not what we're saying. But even within the fact that the care plan, for whatever reason, and again, I'm not even going there because I don't know the patient, I don't know the circumstances, but for whatever reason, the care plan says they mustn't make eye contact when they give this lady's drink. There are a variety of ways that you can still show you have a caring nature towards this lady, because, you can do it like that. You make eye contact and I've given her the drink. So technically I've done it. You can also... Oh, sir.
How are you?
Sir. Oh, very well.
You know each other well.
We know each other well. So, no, it's put me right off my stroke. Just sit down, Mr. Francis, you're putting me off. So we could go in, as I say, and just do that, technically, given a drink, not made eye contact. We could go in, put it down rather loudly. Technically, I've done it. You could also go in it down quietly and come back. Done exactly the same thing, followed those technical instructions, but I have demonstrated in a small way that I still value the person as a fellow human being, and I still value the fact that they need to be cared for in whatever way it is being done. So we've got all these 3 different domains, and we've got all these different categories, and it's on 2 sides of A4, so not lots of bits of paper. Next one, please, assistant. Oh, I'll have a quick slurp of the gin and tonic. Good imagination as well.
You have to go forward and then go back. Very sensitive, isn't
It is very sensitive.
Is that it?
That's one of them. That'll do. So this gives you some of the areas that you will be looking for. So it might well be that you're watching something, and you watch it, and then you reflect a bit. What did I just see? Well, actually, what I saw was let me just think of a good example. I saw the housekeeper go up to Lorraine and ask her if she wants a drink, go back, get the cup of tea, and come back and give it to Lorraine. So easy. Bit of a non-caring activity. But actually, when I think about it, what I saw was this housekeeper went up to Lorraine, made eye contact, said, "Hello Lorraine, do you want a cup of tea or a coffee?" Listened to her answer, then reflected back her answer, smiled, made eye contact, went off, made the cup of tea, came back and put it down and just said to her, "Hang on, don't drink it for a minute or two, it needs to cool down." So what I actually saw in that 45 seconds from the housekeeper or domestic or care assistant or whoever it to be, is I saw positive person-centred care, I saw positive communication, I saw positive food and drink, because food and drink, as I've just illustrated, can be done in 110 different ways. Positive food and drink. And I also saw a bit of anticipatory care, because I was anticipating that she might not remember that the tea is a bit hot, so I saw the housekeeper care assistant suggesting to her that she didn't drink it for a minute. So I actually saw 5 different things going on in that 30 seconds by breaking it down. So, and the next one, please. Responding to the small things is one of the categories, which is about talking to somebody or enjoying something with somebody that's not directly relevant to their job. The maintenance man who chatted about football. If it's clinically appropriate, it might be, as I saw in hospital, it was before Christmas last year, and the staff nurse came in and the patients was still on the ward. She had 2 days off and there was a patient still on the ward, and the patient said, "Oh, did you go to your granddaughter's nativity?" "Oh, it was lovely, she was a fairy and her wings fell off." And they had a little chat. Because isn't that human? Isn't that what you do? Now clearly, if you were working in a unit where you were caring and supporting people who had been charged and prosecuted and found guilty of issues to do with paedophilia, you would not discuss your children with them. That would not be appropriate. But it might be appropriate in that environment to talk about the fact that you'd watched Manchester United on the television the night before. So within whatever clinical setting you're in, there would be rules and boundaries about what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate, light-hearted conversation. But I can't think of any environment, and even at Ashworth, where they have to be very particular and sure about the sorts of things and disclosures that staff members make to the patients that's there, because of the very special needs of the client group. The staff are able to respect and value those patients as fellow human beings because that's what they are. So there is a third domain which is called patient safety. Now this list you might be looking at and say, "Oh yeah, that's a health and that's infection control audit," but it's not. Because this is not an infection control audit, this is patient hand hygiene. Was the patient given the chance to wash their hands before or after they used a commode or went to the loo or whatever? Use of clinical waste bins and spillages. Now this is a great one, because this isn't, you know, I don't know, counting how many yellow sacks you've used in a week or whatever. I was doing an audit, I was doing an observation last year in a hospital, and it was in the same half hour that I saw the staff nurse having the lovely chat about her daughter being a fairy in the nativity play. Was another another nurse and a care assistant were doing bed baths using these cardboard bowls that you have to use nowadays, don't you? You're not allowed to use proper washing bowls anymore in some places, and they use cardboard bowls. And they were clearly trying to save the hospital money, because they obviously clearly in their heads decided you didn't need to empty the clinical waste bin. So I was sitting there as a visitor watching these nurses and care assistants empty the water out the bowls, and then they went and put one of these washing up bowls into the clinical waste bag. So that was fine. They went away and they did another wash, and they came back and then put another one, but the bag was full. So they rammed it in and put their hands right in, rammed it in, broke the first one up, then put the second one in, rammed it all in. Then they went and did the third one. So I'm sitting there for 20 minutes and they didn't bother to change their gloves in between. And I'm sitting there as a visitor watching this. So is it any wonder that I would leave that hospital thinking, well, that's a filthy place. So it's how do you see it as a patient? It doesn't matter whether actually technically that's right or not. I don't think it was. Laundry. Is it left lying around on the floor? Gloves and protective clothing. Did it look as did they go from one patient to the other without changing anything? You know, that sort of stuff, because that's what people notice. Clinical equipment and patients' personal space. Well, my dad, when he was in hospital, he could have opened a continence equipment shop with the amount of continence equipment. I think they tried everything that was known to man for my poor dad, and then left him free samples. Because we had everything on his bedside cabinet, bedside table, constantly. The man in the bed opposite, he had a milk bottle row of urinals under his bed, which I just sat and saw, because I was visiting my dad. Bed rails. It's not about whether there was a clinical assessment done regarding the risk of bed rails, because as a family member visiting my dad, seeing that Fred over there's got bed rails on, I don't know whether they're clinically indicated and whether the right risk assessments have been done and whether the right measurements have been done and all that old malarkey. That's for someone else to worry about. Well, while I'm sitting here with my dad, I notice the nurse comes along, puts the bed rail down to take some blood. And she wanders off, leaves the bed rail down. That's what I notice, and I think, if he had them up a minute ago, why hasn't he got them up again now? So it's those sorts of things. Clearing up, one of the things that's not on there, which is in the book, is clearing up, is regard to the spillages. It's not whether or not the person is using the right crystals or cloths or whatever it is you're supposed to use these days. All I know as a patient or as a visitor is there's a puddle of something very suspicious looking on the floor over there. Is someone coming along quietly, discreetly clearing it up? That's all I care about, actually, because that will then I will assume that they know what to clear it up with. Next, please. So, just very quickly, because I'm conscious I'll probably run out of time.
Yeah.
Positive care and compassion is the start. They demonstrate respect for the patients. They use opportunities to engage, solve problems without giving the impression that it's too much trouble. The patient is treated first and foremost as a person, and their medical condition is treated within that context. And people try as far as possible to respect the 5 principles of the Mental Capacity Act. Obviously, you know, you're not going to be ticking them off. Passive. Oh, no, don't worry. We've already covered these. Passive is where it's businesslike, where they go through the motions, but they don't show that little spark of emotion that makes you feel that actually they really cared about what they were doing. But they don't treat the person as an object. And passive is where the person, and poor, next one, poor is where they either don't attend to the person, or they're abrupt or negative in tone or body language. They go through the motions, but clearly they don't want to be there. Staff might talk over the patient. They appear to be, and they treat the person as an object or a medical condition. You know these things. You know all of these things. You know all the examples I've given you. You knew them all. All the tool does is enable you to set them out and learn to see what there is to see. So, in summary, because I've run out of time, sorry, once I Twitter on rather. So go through over a few. Yeah. So you, in fact, if you just go, we'll just leave it at that one. Just leave it at that one. You just record with a tally mark on the form when you see these different things, and you also record on occasions examples, so that you can, when you feed back to the team, you can feed back and you can say, Lorraine, I watched you trying to persuade that lady to let you get the keys out of her handbag so the OT could, and it was just lovely. Your smile really, really was what made the difference to that lady. That was a real example, and this staff nurse was about 21, and she just grew in front of me. And she said, really? And I said, your tool, your smile is part of your therapeutic toolkit. Never forget to use it. That was what made that lady feel safe to hand over your keys. I was able to do that. It was 15 seconds, 20 seconds of a busy working day. Equally, I saw the technical person coming around checking machines on the same half hour, and she came up and she was checking this machine, and the lady was laying in the bed with a drip in, and it kept beeping. And so the lady said to this technical lady who was checking the machine, it's making a very funny beeping noise. And the woman with her clipboard, she said, oh, that's nothing to do with me, you'll have to speak to the staff, and went on to the next person. What would have been the harm in her saying, oh dear, sorry, don't know much about that machine, I'll ring your bell, and when the nurse comes over, tell her it's making a funny noise. What would have been the harm in that? So you feed back these positive things, you build that positive culture, that pride. And when you are that manager who's only ever dealing with the bad stuff, and you actually start to get to the point where you think, actually, do you know what? Double time at Tesco's on a Sunday does really seem like a better option than all of this hassle and grief for doing this job. We've had matrons who said they go and do a sit and see just for half an hour. Yeah, they might see the technical person who ignores the patient, but what they know is 100% they know they will see the most wonderful nuggets of care and compassion that is going on day after day after day that they just haven't noticed because they're so busy buried in the mire of bureaucracy and complaints and regulations. And they just stop and they see, and it restores their faith in the fact that actually the vast majority of people who work in the caring world are very, very caring. And for me, that's what the tool does. It's also being used in universities. It's also now being used to teach students how to show they are showing care and compassion. It's growing just by word of mouth, but I hope it's given you some ideas about the tool. I've got some information about it if you do think it might be something of use to you. But if it's not, just having listened this afternoon, I hope will give you an idea just to go back and just stop and watch the tiny, tiny things, because that's where you will see in your care environments, care and compassion is going on every single minute of every single day. Thank you very much.
We're 10 minutes before our time, but I think what I'll do is I'll introduce Jane now, and you go straight through. When it finishes at 3, there's time for networking, and that's probably the time when you can ask Lynn and Jane questions. Is that okay? And then we're not wasting any time now. It's important for Jane to talk about how the tool is used and how important it is with safeguarding and the work that she does. So, Jane Basil, thank you.
Vaguely about that. It's very warm in here, isn't it?
It is.
Is there any way we can open a door or a window? Because you're going to be comatose and you're all in these really nice comfy chairs and you're not at work and you're listening to someone else talking and you're in a coma, really. And my mission is to talk for at least as long as Mrs. Fair has talked, to make it equitable and fair, and to hopefully build on what Lynn said. The title is supposed to be about how to use this tool. We're not quite on that yet. So which button am I pressing? This first, that one?
That one and that one. That's forward, that's
All right, okay. So my name's Michael Kane. And it's not really, but I just like saying that. I've been a nurse for about 40 years, and I didn't know Florence Nightingale personally, but it feels like it most times of the week. I do have a habit of calling people that I care for and work with that dreadful name called patients that we're not supposed to use. And I can't call anyone a service user because it makes me twitch. And I can't manage resident or individual or people, actually is quite nice. But do forgive me if I lapse into old NHS speak. And I'm just going to talk really about some of the situations that perhaps some of us find ourselves in and why sometimes we are not in a situation to look at the good stuff. And Lynn reminded us about the Daily Mail on Wednesdays, how much we love the phone going on a Wednesday morning and people ringing us up, telling us the latest scandalous news, and we have to think, oh yes, it is Wednesday. Oh, you're reading the Daily Mail, aren't you? It is not always as bad as the Daily Mail pursues. Difficult situations and safe services. I've got into the bad habit of looking at Wikipedia lately for definitions, and for those of us who've been around a long time, we always used to start off any presentation with a definition of what we're talking about, and we've got out of that habit, but sometimes it's useful. I was thinking about what is it that's difficult about our world, and what is it that we struggle with, and so the definition of difficult, we've got all of this strenuous, arduous, burdensome, demanding, painful, and we think, yeah, that's Monday got through, and then we've got inconvenient and awkward and unfortunate and inappropriate and disadvantageous, oh, that's Tuesday, and then we've got troublesome and tiresome and demanding and unmanageable and perverse and recalcitrant, and I think, well, that's the staff that we're working with, and that must be Wednesday, and then we'll start back, and quite hard work some days coming to work, and we think, why are we doing this? Tesco actually don't pay that much more money than Lidl's a better payer than Tesco's, so that's where you want to go. And if you work for Waitrose, you will get coffee and a Schropperdis till. The reason we all get up to go to work every day is because at some stage, hopefully, in our day, we'll get what I call a magic moment, which for 10 seconds or for 20 seconds, we'll have got a connection with the person that we're caring for. And that connection will be very fleeting. It will be a smile from them. It will be a, oh, thanks very much. We'll have made them comfortable. We'll have reassured them. And in the briefest way possible, we'll have had that thanks. And we've got that connectionness. And it gives us a bit of a warm, fluffy feeling inside. And that 12-hour shift that we've just endured with no coffee breaks, and we've let the lunch still in a briefcase, and we've not had a wee, then actually that quick connection, you think, oh, I've made somebody feel better. And that 12-hour day, you think, I think I might come back again tomorrow. Whatever it is we're doing, whether we're a care assistant, a brain surgeon, the housekeeper, we need a magic moment. Now, what the Sit and See tool can do for you is it will help you describe that magic moment for other people. Because that's what we're a bit rubbish at, actually, is describing that magic moment and what we've done and why we've done it. My nurses colleagues, I think, are particularly bad at describing what we do well. We can always tell you when it goes tits up, but actually, when it goes well, we just lost the words, you just do it. So all of these difficult things, and I thought it was quite interesting, actually, looking at the difference between how few words. Very fascinating. This is very tiresome and awkward and accommodating. I'm pressing the right buttons. Safeguarding adults. If you'd have seen me and Mrs. Fair trying to have a telephone conference yesterday on my phone at home, this is just a piece of cake, quite frankly. Safeguarding adults. And safeguarding adults has got the capacity, just in those 2 words, to make your blood run cold and you start hyperventilating and worrying about what's going to happen, because it's all terrible safeguarding and it's always somebody else that's doing it, and it's our role to make sure that we know that somebody else is doing it and it's not us. And what we tend to forget, all of us, is that it's prevention is the primary goal. That we don't want to just stop it happening, we want to prevent it from starting. And the absence of care and compassion can be that first little sign when was going wrong. But it can also be a sign that the rest of the group, the rest of the organisation are actually functioning quite well, despite there may have been safeguarding alerts and despite investigations. It's not always every single person. You know that there may be 1 or 2 people who are not doing it right. But the whole organisation comes under the spotlight. You've got inspectors coming in, sorry David, you've got CQC coming in every day of the week, we've got all the other organisations that come look at the records. Everyone's under scrutiny, everyone gets very, very twitchy and really anxious. And what doesn't come out from those investigations is what everyone else is doing all at the same time. Now, I've used Sit and See tool in a large care home in my patch that has some significant safeguarding issues. They've been on the TV, all that stuff. Luckily, it wasn't Lynn's Panorama programme, so I knew I might be all right here. And what I was able to do with the Sit and See tool is observe the practice that was going on in the rest of the home. And it was really good care. And because it wasn't being documented, because it wasn't looking at the care plans, I wasn't reading the care plans, I wasn't looking at the medication charts, I wasn't looking at the incident forms, I was sat in the lounge, because the Sit and See tool is primarily designed to watch what's happening in public areas. You're not going to look at intimate care behind closed doors. It's called Sit and See because that's what you do. You sit and you see. You can do a WW, which is a watch or wander on the corridor, if you feel like it. I prefer WWs. I don't like to sit still. I get a bit twitchy and my hips ache, so I'll do a WW. But all you're doing is what you're doing everywhere else, is listening, watching and observing. And I was able to, using the Sit and See tool, these little 30 seconds, these little communication, their little magic moments, I was able to document that and go to the management of the home that was being critically reviewed and say, I've been there in the morning at 6:30, I've been at 2:30 in the afternoon, I've been in the evening, I've been on a Sunday afternoon, been on a Saturday morning. And the care that I'm watching that's being delivered by registered nurses, housekeepers, care assistants, that I observed is really good. Look at all these tallies of positive practice. There's been a few passives. I haven't got any poor practice. So whatever the investigation is being focused on, the rest of your staff that are here today that I've observed are doing a really, really good job. And they need to be told they're doing a really good job under very difficult circumstances. So that's when I think it can be really used to prevent this. Oh, hang on a minute. Press the right button. The very word safety covers, we've got to be protected against all of this lot, which is in the safeguarding guidance, of course, physical, social, spiritual, financial, political, emotional, occupational, everything protected. Now, we don't protect ourselves from that lot. Never mind our families, we might be able to protect them from occasionally bits of those, but actually, if you can protect yourself 100%, 7 days a week, I think bloody marvellous, quite frankly. But that's our aim, but we want to try and prevent things happening. Lynn and I not being from the locality, the principality I should say, do you still call it that? Is it still a principality? Nation. We did have a look at the place to call home reports, which I think has had some interesting conclusions, and clearly matches the current philosophy of just let's slate everybody all the time because it's all terrible. And if we just say that it's terrible all the time to everybody, then things will get better. And actually that does you all a great disservice, because you all know you're doing some stonkingly good work everywhere and that's not being recognised. So it's slightly biased, I think, and that seems to be the focus at the moment. But two of the conclusions that I thought were interesting although this report gives you no advice about how the heck you're going to achieve them, is that the emotional frailty and emotional needs of older people living in care homes are not fully understood and recognised, and that emotional neglect is not recognised as a form of abuse, and the role of the care workers is not valued. And certainly if we're paying care workers less than they can get to go and stack shelves in Lidl's, well, what's the point? You know, how much value is there in their system, and why should they bother to do? And I thought that yeah. Is that the same one? That what we've got to do is recognise about emotional neglect, which to me is sort of the opposite to care and compassion. If you're not being given care in a compassionate way, then emotional neglect is at the opposite end of the spectrum, and it is a continuum that we always try to be at one end of the continuum, but sometimes it tends to go to the other way, and that older people receive compassionate and dignified care, and that's a real struggle for us sometimes. Yeah, it is. Because we're in some really difficult places as care staff in all settings. The difficult situations are often related to, can the individual consent to the care that you think is in their best interest and you should be giving them? And of course, as nurses particularly, we always know what's the best interest of our patients, don't we? Because we're nurses, so obviously we know what's best for you. There used to be a patient's charter, some of you might remember, the early 80s. Every patient has a right to choose. And I used to add into my head, yeah, only if you agree with me, because I'm the ward sister. And if you don't agree with me, you ain't going anywhere, pal. You're staying like me. And as the consultants learnt that they don't have a choice either, unless they agreed with the ward sister, because I was the one who had the power, not the patient then, or the consultant. Are they able to consent or comply with the care and treatment you want to be able to give them? We've got this huge dilemma at the moment about autonomy, and is it okay for one person to say, I'm the bee's knees and whatever I want, this is what I should have? How much consensus is around, and is it automatically a deprivation of liberty if you say no, you can't have it? And lots of discussion at the moment. I want to try and stay clear of deprivation of liberty because we're only here for the next half an hour, not for the next 3 days. There's some decision making still is of a challenge to us. Who is making the decisions? Is it the individual? Is it the family? Is it the doctor? Is it the social worker? Is it the next door neighbour? Who is making these decisions? Who's really calling the shots? I think you'll find it's the doctor still thinks they're calling the shots. The technology issue about, is it enabling, is it a deprivation of liberty? Some individuals want to have a GPS tagging on their phone. They'll feel safe, they feel independent, they can go off out knowing that their family know where they are. Some people say, I'm not having a GPS tag, I think I am a paedophile. No, thank you, that's what prisoners have that. I don't want people to know where I am. Some of the enabling technology, some of the telecare stuff, I think is interesting. And is it controlling? You can have someone who maybe is a risk of falls and you want to put a sensor pad in so that you're alerted if the person stands and wants to walk. Now, it's enabling if you're going to that person when your alarm goes off and you say, oh, well now what can I do for you? Where do you want to go? To the toilet? This way. That's fine. Or are you going to go and say, no, just sit back down again, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Well, that could be construed as restrictive practice and restraint if all you're going to do is use it to say, just sit back down and don't move. Lots of balance. I'm going to talk a little bit about this difficulty about restraint and clinical holding, and about when we're making best interest decisions. Again, whose best interests are we thinking about? Are we thinking about the persons? Are we thinking about the families, the doctors, the staff? Whose best interest is really being talked about? Some of you may have seen the reports that came out from the House of Commons and the House of Lords last year about the Mental Capacity Act implementation, or rather should I say the lack of implementation of the Mental Capacity Act, and how we're really not using it as well. Now, when we're talking about difficult situations and difficult behaviours particularly, these are perhaps some of the things that we see from individuals who feel frustrated, feel angry, can't communicate effectively, may not be able to make decisions. We see this angry and aggressive behaviour. We see the excessive walking about, a bit like I'm doing at the moment. We see repetitive behaviours, particularly with people with cognitive impairment. And that's when we start to be concerned about how are we giving the care and treatment, and what's happening. Ooh, what? Now, as I said, I've been a nurse for 40 years, and I didn't know Florence Nightingale personally, but it does feel like it. And Florence Nightingale in 1897 said this great quote: "A great deal has been spoken about on the effect of the mind on the body, and I do wish a little more attention was paid to the effect of the body on the mind." If we don't keep people healthy in their body, then the impact on their mind is quite significant. So all of the essential things that we think about, constipation, pain management, hydration, mobility, if those needs aren't met, then their behaviours will change. And it's only taken about 112 years for the NHS to catch up with this idea that the body impacts and affects on the mind. I don't know if any of you have seen the document that came out last year. It says blithely running about NHS Protect guidance. Have any of you seen this? It's a really comprehensive and useful guide to meeting needs and reducing distress, and it's guidance on the prevention and management of clinically related challenging behaviour in NHS settings. You can download it. It's got a fantastic website. It's got DVD resources. It takes you through all the assessments and the investigations that you should think of doing, whatever the situation, to ensure that you are meeting the physical needs and addressing those needs of pain, dehydration, constipation, infection, that may be the precursor to your patient's behaviour being challenging. And I try not to use the word challenging behaviour, because actually the individual isn't intentionally being challenging. It's a challenge to me as a clinician to work out what the heck they want to do. They're distressed. They're distressed because they've got pain, infection, but they can't tell me that. And particularly if it's someone with a dementia, which is a communication issue, that person can't tell you that it hurts here, or they feel sick, or they want to go to the toilet. And one of my personal examples of that is my man on the ship. I was called one afternoon to one of the acute medical wards in Bristol, and they said that John, this gentleman, was being very distressed, and could I come and sort it out? So I waddle up and have a look, and John's walking up and down the ward, and he's going, "I'm on the ship, I'm on the ship, I'm on the ship." And he'd been doing this for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. "I'm on the ship, I'm on the ship." And the staff had done their usual techniques, you know, come and sit down, have a cup of tea. No, do come and sit down and have a cup of tea. And he'd become more and more agitated, and "I'm on the ship." And now, when people were coming towards him, he was doing this with his arm. And I thought, that's going to be good. I can see where this is headed soon. If we don't solve what's going on here, it'll be security, sit down, it'll be haloperidol for him if we're not careful. So I've got a whole team of clinicians, you know, consultant, 2 registrars, an OT, physio, all their arms folded. "What's he doing, Jane?" And I thought, I have no idea what he's doing. They had to tell me about him. "Oh yes, well, he's in with Parkinson's disease, and he's got a chest infection, and he's 92, and his GP's fed blogs." "Oh great, that's absolutely no help whatsoever." "I'm on the ship, I'm on the ship." And I thought, if I don't sort this out now, my clinical street cred's going to go straight out the window. And luckily his wife came in to visit, and she was clutching his life story sheet. Now, we'd had about 3 of these before, but because he kept being moved, we kept losing the life story sheet, because that wasn't important in acute medicine. It's much more important when we have his x-rays and his GP and the list of medications and his notes. We don't really need his life story sheet, because that just sucks your fluffy bunny stuff, isn't it, really? So his life story sheet tells me that John had been a serviceman in World War II. and he'd been captured in Greece, and he'd been put on a troop ship to sail to his prisoner of war camp. Whilst the prisoners were on the troop ship, they weren't allowed to use the toilet. They had to soil themselves, stood up in their uniforms. Fast forward to 2010, John's got short-term memory loss because he's got Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. He's in a strange place, hospital ward, really weird. No signs and no clues about where to go to the toilet, because if you sat in the bed, you don't get a sign to say where the toilet is. You only get signs in the corridor. If you're in the bed, there's no arrow with a toilet seat to show you which way to go. So he was trying to find, he had expressive dysphasia. He couldn't tell you that he's got this awful feeling in his stomach, and if that meant that he's going to be incontinent, he was back on the ship. So all we had to do with him was take him to the toilet. That was quite a difficult by this stage because he got so distressed. I'm on the ship, he didn't recognise his life. And actually when we said we're going to take you to the toilet, John, this is where the toilet is, it took a while to sink in. And of course when you get into a toilet in a hospital ward, it doesn't look like your bathroom, does it? Because it's got a standard lift, a whole load of bedpans, 4 mattresses, and a load of continence aids, which you don't tend to have in your bathroom at home, do you? Unless I'm very much mistaken. And it's all magnolia walls, and it's all white. And if you've got visual impairment, as most older adults have, you can't see anything. Which is why gentlemen in hospital wards do tend to wee in sisters' waste paper basket. They're not deliberately weeing in sisters' waste paper basket, but it's a receptacle that looks like a urinal that they can actually see. Because it doesn't make any sense. So, the effect on the body, on the mind, and our behaviour. This is an excellent resource, whether you work in the NHS or a care home or whatever. You can get hard copies from it, and it's written by geriatricians. It's got support from the Learning Disability Society, the Alzheimer's Society, Mind, and it's about how to enable you to not have to use any physical restraint or restrictive physical intervention. You can do everything in this book that suggests. You can use all your communication skills, you can use all your therapeutic touch, and sometimes it reaches a stage where actually you have to use a physical intervention. And we don't like to talk about restraint unless you work in forensic psychiatry, and we tend to think about restraint as being face down, arm up and back. Those of us that have had restraint training over the years, it's been invariably about breakaway, de-escalation. Keep yourself safe, don't do anything. Now that's a lot of help when you've got a face with a lady who has severe cognitive impairment, who doesn't recognise that she's been double incontinent, doesn't understand and cannot comply with the fact that you need to change her wet knickers before she gets a pressure ulcer and before her dignity is compromised and before it becomes distressing. So you have to hold her, or someone has to do something, and we never get taught that. We never get taught how to hold someone. Most of us have done it at some stage in our careers, quite often fairly regularly, but we don't call it restraint. And when we've done it, we don't like to talk about it. We don't mention it. It doesn't go down in the care plan, we don't want to talk about it. And when we ask organisations about their restraint policies, we'll often get an answer, oh, we don't have a policy of restraint, because of course we don't do it. Well, I beg to differ, because certainly in many organisations, we do it all the time. I'd like to restrain this laptop, actually. There are a number of ways in which we can restrain people, some of which you don't think about. Positive restraints or negative restraints. So holding a baby and having a cuddle, keeping them still, that doesn't seem to be restraint, is it? This looks like it's a restraint. Looks like some of the scary stuff we don't like to do. This definitely looks like a restraint. That's got to be safety. That's not really a restraint, is it? That's just mean reducing the risk of an accident. That could well turn into something very nastily restrained. And there was a promotion many years ago for the effective use of bed rails in hospitals, and it was from the National Patient Safety Agency. There was a whole set of cartoons, and some of you might remember seeing them. There was one particular one that had a patient in a bed in a cartoon with bed rails at the side, and the matron is saying to the student nurse, switch the electricity off now, nurse. and she'd electrified the bed rails, which I thought probably quite effective, but it was a restraint, and actually bed rails are not supposed to be restraints, they're there to stop people falling out of bed. So there's a number of ways in which we restrain people. Emotional neglect is not classed as a restraint, it's classified as abuse. But in hospitals particularly, we will sedate people, we will put them in a position, in physical restraining, where we'll put stroke tables in front of them perhaps. The days of Buxton chairs are no longer, but you can do just the same job with a stroke table and a recliner. If you put a bed rail up because you think once they've got out of bed, they might fall when they walk, that's a restraint. If you put the bed rail up because you're worried that someone's going to fall out of bed, that's fine, that's what a bed rail's for. But there's something that gets to be a bit flaky in between. So there's a number of ways that we restrain patients routinely, and we need to be a bit more honest and start talking about why we're doing a restrictive intervention and when we shouldn't be. And we're not talking about the issues at the moment. The Mental Capacity Act, which by now should be engraved into your heart, and you should be able to recite the 5 principles of the Mental Capacity Act without blinking. What's number 1 of the Mental Capacity Act, the first principle? Assume capacity. Number 2?
Every effort to help them make their own decisions, support to make decisions.
I'll show you a good way of remembering the 5. How much time have I got?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
1 minute now.
Oh, I can't do it. I'll do it afterwards. If someone lacks capacity and you need to give them care and treatment that's in their best interest, the Mental Capacity Act is very clear in that you can use a restrictive physical intervention. You can restrain. You might need to steady their arm to give them an injection. You might have to hold them to change their wet knickers. As long as it's proportionate to the risk of harm, then that's absolutely fine. Done it. If you're going to prevent harm, if the intervention is proportionate to the likelihood and the seriousness of this harm. So my lady who's been doubly incontinent, the likelihood of seriousness of them getting an infection, a urinary infection, tissue viability, loss of dignity, they're quite significant risks. So I would want to ensure that doesn't happen, and I want to deliver care and treatments in their best interest. So I may need to hold them without contravening the Human Rights Act and without contravening these particular articles, the right to liberty, prohibition on inhumane and degrading treatment, and a right to private life. Clinical holding is the term that's being used to deliver care and treatment. If you're not delivering care and treatment, then you're not doing clinical holding, you're physically restraining. The use of restrictive physical interventions that enable staff to assess or deliver essential care and treatment, or to hold or support a patient to receive care or treatment where their behaviour may limit the ability to effectively deliver such treatment. This is a last resort. You have used all your good communication skills, you have used your therapeutic knowledge, you have addressed them with kindness and compassion, you've tried every which way you can think of to enable you to give the care and treatment. The way that then you can continue with your care and compassion is enabling you to do it in an appropriate manner with the training. I'll just go back there because at the moment we're between a rock and a hard place, because we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't safeguard a person doing a clinical procedure or treatment, that can be considered negligent, particularly if that treatment was deemed in their best interest. If we do restrain them to enable to give that treatment, we could be facing prosecution. You are going to be protected as long as you're sticking with the principles of the Mental Capacity Act. If we fail to act at all, not holding an individual, then will be another constitute an offence of ill treatment or willful neglect. Where sit and see comes into this arena is that if you're using a sit and see observation and you're checking out the culture of care in your organisation, then you will reduce the necessity for having to use physical restrictive interventions because you've got a good culture. It will make sure that you're safeguarding that it's a last resort, that if you have to do this. But we need to start becoming more honest and upfront about this whole topic, and we need to start talking about the training that we need, because none of us have had training. I say none of us, Lynn and I have now had training about how to hold someone when we're carrying out duty of care. More importantly, we've had training about all the things we can do to not have to hold them to make it successful. And I wish I'd had this training 35 years ago when I was on the wards as a new staff nurse, understanding how I was supposed to deliver this care and treatment to someone who can't consent and who can't comply to treatment. And we need to start talking with our commissioners, with our management, and looking at how we can get the right training. Clinical holding is just restraint by another name. It requires the same level of scrutiny and to ensure that vulnerable people receive the same treatment outcomes as other people. And we need to ensure our staff are trained and prevent the misuse and abuse of restraint. And we need to think about improving our performance by targeting measures instead of measuring targets. CPI are the company that Lynn and I have done some work with in our training, who are one of the few people I've come across in the country who appear to be able to offer this kind of training that helps midwives, learning difficulty community nurses, A&E nurses, children's nurses, understand the principles of what clinical holding is and when you can deliver it. And is not solely concerned with breakaway and de-escalation techniques, which are important. And love and compassion are necessities, and they're not luxuries. They're not an add-on. They're an integral part of your daily care. And we need them ourselves as staff just as much as the people that we're caring for. And I think that the Sit and See tool helps you demonstrate how you can give that to each other as well as the people that you're caring for. Because if we don't have those, then we're not going to get through this. Sit. I talked as fast as I could. Can I tell them the 5 things?
Yes.
Right, raise your left hand. Right, number 1. That size? Okay. Assume someone's got capacity. Okay. Number 2. Waggy finger. Teacher saying, what have you done? What have you done? So number 2 is, what information? What have you done to empower someone to make a decision? What information have you given them? How have you given it them? Have you written it down? Have you come back again? So what have you done to give them capacity? Number 3. An unwise or eccentric decision does not mean you lack capacity. I'll do whatever I want to do. Number 3. So these first 3 about have they got it? Okay, I assume you've got the capacity. What have you done to give them capacity? And 3, if you want to make a stupid decision, that's fine by me, if you've got capacity. Number 4, I can't do Star Trek, so. Number 4, what normally happens with that finger? What do we put on this 4th finger? Wedding ring. And what do we say about our wedding? No, what should you What should you say about your wedding? It was the best thing of your life. Best interest. Anything you're going to do for someone who lacks capacity, you're going to do it in the best interest. Number 5, little finger. Anything you do is the least restrictive. 5 principles of Mental Capacity Act. Assume, what have you done? Assume, anything you want to do, best interest and the least restrictive. That's a quick way of remembering the principles.
Okay, right, we've got 15 minutes left before the end of this seminar. My summary will be extremely short, so I'd like to welcome Claire Aston, who is the Senior Divisional Nurse at an Iron Bevan Health Board for complex conditions or complex care, to come and ask us a few questions. And you've got a little bit of work to do, I think.
Yes, thanks Lorraine. Hi to everybody here this afternoon, and thank you for the entertaining presentations as well, and that we've listened to. Sorry, I've got to stand over here to wherever the camera is. Yes. I think it might be just a good idea if everybody stands up for a few moments. I'm aware that everyone's been sitting apart from those brave enough to go outside. And if you haven't already done so, will you just say hello to the person nearest to you, sitting next to you? Because you've not already done that. Right, and you know, when you're ready, just sit down. Stretch those legs. My intention this afternoon, after Lorraine asked me to start to sort of sum up this afternoon and, you know, what's an Iron Bevan going to do about it next? Well, I was sort of a little bit concerned about that because there might only just be Tanya and I here from an Iron Bevan, but there are a few more colleagues, so that's great to see. And I thought, well, this has got to be bigger than an Iron Bevan University Health Board. So, and you know, thanks to Lorraine for that, but it got me thinking. I've no idea really about the whole nature of your sit and see tool and or what Jane was going to talk about around safeguarding, but you know, you've given us a whistle-top tour of everything that we're doing for people, whether we're caring for them in a hospital environment, we can transpose that into a care home or a residential home environment or into a person's own home. And for me, that's fantastic, and it's sort of the magic in the tool that we heard, and I was lucky enough to have some time with Lynn this morning. So, you know, my thoughts are you going to be with me on this, or are you going to stand alone and say, well, actually, it was all very interesting this afternoon, but I'm not actually going to do anything about it. I've listened, I'm just going to walk away from here. Or are you actually going to be a little bit more proactive and think, well, actually, there is something we can do. It's really, Lynn has explained the simplicity of the tool, and I guess some people will be having lots of questions and around sort of academic and technicality things, but actually, you don't need to make it complicated. So my challenge to you is there something that you can do and go out of here with to whatever part of the organisation that you're working in that will actually do something positive to affect care in all the ways that we've heard from the two speakers this afternoon. So when I was just I've only got 2 slides, just putting these thoughts together, I thought we were going to be in tables and that we were going to have opportunities for the flip charts and the post-its, and those were my instructions to Joanne. I think they're way down the back and it's going to be far too disruptive to do that. But I really want you to just engage in some conversations with the people around you, just to have that brief description about what something looks like before you leave here this afternoon. So you've heard it. You might not like the idea of another tool because you've got tools that you already use. You might be very familiar with fundamentals of care, information from My Home Life Cymru, age concern monitoring tools, CSIW's whole array, wherever you are, David, I can't see you at the moment, or what you do in your own organisations. We have lots of things in an Iron Bevan, particularly for the care home sector. And I'd just like you to work through these questions. But each time, you know, when we get to the final stage of who needs to be involved, what are you going to do, and when by, keep asking yourself, what's stopping you? Because if you leave here today without taking anything away into practice, to me, it will have been a waste of time for you to be here. You're here because you want to do something different. You know, the people I know that are in this room are here because I know that they are really fired up, they're passionate. Some people don't like that word, but really that's the thing that motivates them. We've heard people say, you don't get out of bed to do a bad job. Carers don't get out of bed to do a bad job. Nurses don't, therapists don't, social workers. Sometimes the system is not always working for us, but actually these things can help us change the system. So I think you've got probably about 7 minutes to capture some of these things in a small sort of
conversation with the people next to you, and then we'll have a few minutes for feedback to hear what you've got to say around some of these things. We're not going to do it to death, I promise you, but as long as you do take some time to have a look at these points and have some ideas jotted down, and we're not going to take the information away from you. Okay, thank you. Lorraine.
They could actually write these few things down. I could have brought the people on paper, but they're talking away. Not long enough, really, is it?
No, it's not.
No. Yeah, I was hoping that we would have a little bit about this because this is all new information, isn't it, which we need to share.
I'm going to scribe for Claire.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. And yeah, there was a lot of noise in the room, so I hope it wasn't that you were just catching up because you've not had time since Christmas, because 3 weeks have flown by, and that you were actually thinking and sharing thoughts from this afternoon. So really, you know, something can be done. Are we all, yeah, lots of nods around and positives. So how are we going to do something, or how are you going to do something? Anybody bold enough to share? Thank you.
Denise Rickson, I'm probably the one and only representative of Healthcare Inspector of Wales today. A very proud speaker, registered nurse of many years, and joined HIW a year ago. For those of you who may not know, we do lead small teams into GP surgeries, dentists and hospital wards, mostly on an unannounced basis, and we take a lay reviewer with us each time. And we've been struggling to find something that would be useful for them because their role is incredibly important to us in getting patients experience. This tool is fantastic. I mean, I've been lucky enough to use Sophie in the past, short observational framework for inspection when I was an inspector at CSSIW, and thanks to David for that. Can't see him at the moment.
He's right at the back, just
He's
there,
right at the back.
underneath the wine glass picture.
Very powerful tool actually in terms of acting as an informal advocate on the behalf of patients and in providing feedback to providers. So I'll certainly be going back to HIW with a view to getting our lay reviewers to use this as part of the Dignity and Essential Care Inspection Toolkit.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So another group really, have you talked about whatever it is that you discussed that you might do, when are you going to do it by? So can we have somebody from the back over there? Anyone on the left over there at the back? What you're going to do, by when?
Sorry,
Yeah?
we're from North Wales. From
Hello,
North
Betsy.
Wales. And we patient experience to use the word patient rather than service user. What we've just been, in relation to the Older People's Commissioner, you know, the nursing home report.
Yes.
I had an email from the director of nursing asking if we work with the nurses in charge of the development, and I'm looking at how we can get residents' feedback. So towards this really lends itself. We have got some volunteers within the health board who we can perhaps
Use. Train.
Yeah. So we've decided we're going to write a plan, a rollout type of plan on the train on the way back, so we can just try and look at who we need to get involved.
Excellent.
In the health
Thank you.
board.
And that's got to be quite quickly because you've got to get some responses in for the OPC paper.
We've got them in, but this is sort of the meat on the bone, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Okay, well we'll probably keep in touch on that one. See
Plan
how
on
that
train
goes.
there. So
Yes.
as quick as it can.
North Wales on there?
North Wales.
Yeah.
Bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Other people, anything to share? Yeah. Hi.
Well, I had a quick look round and I actually can't see if there's anybody else from Community Health Council here. So if I'm talking for the Community Health Councillors and there is somebody else, we can have a
I
discussion
can't see anyone
afterwards.
else that I know.
No, but this strikes me as being very similar to the lot of the work which is done when the Community Health Council go into hospital wards and a range of other areas where the service is delivered. Now at the moment what we're looking for is we primarily identify poor experience, the poor environment for the patients in hospital settings, for example. And I'm actually thinking, well, this fills a gap about actually encouraging people to go that extra mile with the positive aspects of care, which change the whole experience, change the relationship, change the openness of the patient to actually maximising the benefit of the experience that comes out of that. The whole thing about the dignity of care, the food issues, the whole care issues, the hygiene issues, this really does put a different tilt on this, and I really want to take this back and talk to the CHC about this. What can be introduced, I don't know at the moment because we're working with the health board. and the health services. That's about that conversation for them to tell us how we can raise their standards by incorporating this.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Did you hear that? I should have been asking you. If you didn't hear, let us know. And over here on the right, my right-hand side, your left, these groups here, anything to feedback? Very quiet.
You don't need to identify yourself. If it's just an idea that you've thought of, we won't write it down.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything that feels they perhaps need to, that they've discussed? Thanks,
I
John.
suppose for me it just feels that this could really be of value for anybody, be it in sheltered accommodation, for scheme managers, for support workers, for catering staff, you know, anybody. And before I came today, I wasn't really sure what I was coming into, and suspected it might be very, very hospital.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, I think it could just be adapted anywhere.
Yeah. And that's a really well made point. Thank you, Joanne, for that, because you know what we heard from Lynn is that there are variations on the model. It might just be word changes and things, but it does get a slightly different reiteration for whatever part of a service that you're working with. So there is one for community, there is one for high secure, there is one for hospitals. I haven't listed them all, but they're there, and universities and such like. So, and we were even speaking this morning about what we could do in a person's own home, and using it as part of a supervisory practice as well. And you know, there are huge opportunities. It's another tool, but wouldn't it be great if we could really use this tool? And you know, you probably will have relatives that are willing to also participate. Mrs. Strange.
Sorry, there's just one thing I was thinking about, who's actually doing the safeguarding training. Obviously with the social care and wellbeing bill and the responsibility of professionals to report. I don't know if the safeguarding training that you guys do makes reference to that, but I think it should, because if people are using this tool and identify something that's clearly safeguarding, there is going to be the duty
To report.
Oh
yes, very much so.
And the same with the new NMC code for nurses and the new council. You know, it needs to somehow be in. That's just a plea, really. It needs to be in the training for anybody that's using the tool.
Yeah. Lynn, is that?
Oh yes, there is a section on the there is a set part of the training. There's a section on the form where you actually have to record where you have to intervene, and also there's a section on the form where you write down what you feedback. Although you feedback observations in general terms, you may well also feedback and report specific things if there are specific things of concern. So absolutely, you wouldn't be expected to sit there and watch someone just about to fall off the chair thinking, well, I'll sit here and wonder whether anyone's ever going to come and help this lady, and watch a fractured neck and femur occurring before your very eyes. You know, very clearly you can step in and sort of take action.
I think that's quite important, because it's not, and no disrespect to my academic colleagues, this is not a research project. You're not sitting there to work out how long it takes for somebody to come. If something horrible is happening in front of you, you're going to go, stop doing that. Or, you know, if someone needs some support or comfort, you're not just there just to watch nothing happen at all. You know, there was a lady who was freezing cold, sat by the bed, and she needed a dressing gown and a blanket putting on. So after a couple of minutes, I put my paper down and made her comfortable, and then carried on with my observation. So you've got to participate. You try and distance yourself, and I find it quite difficult, as you can imagine, sitting still and saying nothing for a start, and not interfering and involvement. But actually, you get used to that. It does feel really strange, because you're all used to rushing around doing things, and it does feel quite odd sitting there not doing anything, just watching and observing. But you'd be surprised how quickly you sort of disappear into the background almost, and how staff themselves, although they're very self-conscious when you first sit there for the first 5 minutes, if they're normally not very nice people, they can keep being nice for about 5 minutes, and then they'll revert to type. And if they're normally always very nice, they'll continue being nice. So they'll forget, they'll just revert, and you just disappear into the woodwork for a few minutes. And it's quite interesting how quickly that takes effect, if you like. But as I say, it's not a research project, the observation itself, if you are going to sort of make sure nothing terrible happens on your watch.
Yeah.
As it
I think there's just a couple of points to wrap up with. That the observation technique, minimum of 15 minutes, 1-5, and a sort of maximum of about 50 minutes to an hour, so that you don't overdo it. It's that snapshot of time of what you saw or the team that you've trained saw, and the training 2.5 hours for a group of 12 people. Anyway, I think we've got enough on one flip chart. I was,
Every sector on there.
yeah, so thank you for your feedback, and over to yourself now, Lorraine.
Well, it's a very brief summary, just really to say, just make a few notes. Thank you so much for coming, especially those that have come from a long way. I hope you feel it's been worth it. We will be sending you the presentations, we'll send you the position statement on nursing, and if we find anything else we can send you, we will. The important thing is what we that ran the seminar will do as well. Just to share with you, we haven't planned anything definitive yet, but a few heads will get together and decide what we do about using this tool in Wales. I'm really passionate and keen that we find something, and we found something which is useful to celebrate good practice and identify how things can change. And I think this seems to be a good answer to help everybody, including people that use our services and the people of Wales. I'm sure they'll all be very grateful if we use this properly. So what we will be doing is talking further about how we can test this out, I hope. I've obviously got to find funding to do this. How we can test it out in an area, in every one of those areas I see, because there's a good comparative use of the tool there, I think. So that is what we will do. I'm not going to summarise what happened, other than to say that let's take away the thought about identifying the magic moment, because we've lost that aspect of care, I think, a great deal. Not our faults, really. It's society as well. It's not all about care practitioners. It's about attitudes. It's about a lot of other things. But we need to capture that again, because it does belong there. It belongs with everyone who's human, to be honest. So thank you again. And you will... Pardon? There's tea and coffee at the back.